Candice Langford, pelvic and sexual health physiotherapist, and this is the Nurture Pod. We are talking pee, poo, pleasure, pain, periods, pregnancy, postpartum, peri, and postmenopause. All the P's, all supposedly taboo, yet essential to our holistic health and well-being. We are shining a light on each and every one of these, both confidently and comfortably. Let's get curious. Do you feel 100% comfortable in your unique sexuality? Or do you feel uncomfortable and shamed and embarrassed when you potentially want to express yourself in an intimate, different way to what we expect or what we've been told to expect from society? Does it come from a lack of education? Does it come from being shamed and repeatedly told to not go there, or that's taboo, or that's something we don't discuss in public or with doctors? Does it come from that? Is it something to do with permission? Do you feel like you've never been granted permission to explore and express your unique sexuality? We're going to discuss just this with Catriona Boffard, and I am so excited to share this episode with you. But first, one of the most common questions that comes my way is how to have better and more satisfying sex. Although this is multifactorial, I so value the potential of erotic audio content to pique mind and body arousal. The audio app Guided by Glow aims to do just that. Their guided sexual meditation journeys gives you the space to slow down, relax, and connect you to your senses, your creativity, and of course, nurture your relationship to pleasure as you drop deeply inside the feeling body. Listen until the end of today's episode for a special gift from Guided by Glow. Hello, today we are speaking to Catriona Boffard. Catriona is a clinical sexologist, psychotherapist, sexuality researcher, podcaster, and author. She is internationally recognized authority in the field of sexuality and has delivered her expert advice on TV, radio, corporate, and public platforms. She is also an acclaimed academic author and speaker, having published internationally in prestigious journals and textbooks, and speaks for major clients around the world. Catriona has numerous qualifications and is currently undertaking her doctorate in psychotherapy. She is an expert in the field of sexual behaviour, well-being, and mental health, and is particularly passionate about working with people who face difficulties in their sexual experiences, especially women with sexual pain. She believes that by giving people permission to talk about and explore sex, the narrative of sex can ultimately change. She hosts her weekly podcast called Asking for a Friend. She covers topics of sex, intimacy, relationships, and mental health that we may feel a little bit too embarrassed to ask about. So thank you so much, Catriona, for being here today.
It's so awesome to join you, Candice. Absolute pleasure to be here with you.
Great, Catriona. It's so good to have you here. So I just have one question to ask you, and that is, why is permission so groundbreaking in our sex life?
I mean, where do we even start? The thing that permission does for us, I think the best way that I can answer that question is to talk about what not having permission will do to us. So I have never in my career, and I've been doing this now for a decade, I've never actually met more than a handful of clients who come to consult with me for therapy, who have been given permission growing up in their sex education from their elders, their caregivers, their parents, their teachers. They've never had anybody say, it's okay if you do this, it's okay if you are that. And it's such a fundamental part of our sexuality is to feel like we are allowed, we are able to, we can actually engage with different types of sexual acts or in different sort of experiences of orientation or gender or identity. And having that left out of the conversation around sex, where sex education programs are focusing only on risk and danger, as they predominantly do in South Africa and in the US, has a major impact on us and the development that we have into adulthood and our development sexually. So we know what not having permission does to us. And having done this job for 10 years and having read an extensive amount of research, I can see the inverse of what having permission can do for people and how groundbreaking it can be to have somebody, whether that's a therapist, a friend, a parent, in your adulthood, say to you, it is okay if you want to be like this, or you like that, or you don't want this, or you enjoy that. Such simple words, but such a powerful thing to take place for an individual.
Oh, yes, absolutely. It's that permission to be unique. And we know we are unique in every other way, and we're okay with it. You know, we all have different faces, different fingerprints, different preferences for our foods, for our lifestyle, for our choice of exercise. So the same thing kind of needs to be pasted onto our sexuality. And like you say, that permission, it's okay. It's okay to not all be copy pastes of one another. That's beautiful. Thank you for describing the kind of the heart behind why it's so important to be granted permission here.
I think that's something that's really interesting. And if I'm talking specifically about those who identify as women versus those who identify as men, is how much more women are affected by the lack of permission around sexual pleasure in particular than men are. And I think that is the narrative associated to sex when we're growing up, specifically in South Africa or in the US, even sometimes in countries like the UK, Australia, or English-speaking countries. We get sex education that's based on biology and science and anatomy and physiology and reproduction, but we're not actually told about the joys of sex, the pleasures of sex. It's as if at school there's this incredible angst of sharing that part of sex with kids, with teenagers, as if it's going to lead to some terrible behavior. Actually, we do kids so much of a favor if we educate them about what sex actually is, what it can really look like. And if we look at the Dutch sex education system, this is proving it to us, because the Dutch don't only focus on the physiology and reproductive health. They focus on consent and joy and permission as well. And if you look at their sexual development into adulthood, they have a far more positive sexual development than those of us, say, in South Africa or the States, because there isn't that risk and danger focused narrative around sex. And so when you go into a relationship as an adult, if your education and if the messages that you've received around sex have not included any type of permission or compassion around the difference in the experience that you might be having, you feel like there's something wrong with you. You feel like it's you that's the problem. And one of the most profound questions, it's such a simple question, one of the most profound questions myself and my colleagues get asked is, am I normal? And people need that permission. They need to know they're 100% normal, because they don't look like the guy in the porno, or because they can't have sex like the girl in the porn, or in, the Notebook. They're not having rip your clothes off in the rain kind of passionate sex. Yeah. What's wrong with me? Actually, those are completely fantastical versions of sex, and they're completely falsified versions of sex. Mm-hmm. And if we give kids permission around sex, around bodies, around gender, around identity, we are quite literally changing generations in how they experience sexual pleasure, sexual orientation, sexual identity. So I really think that we need to work harder in our sex education systems, in the conversations we're having with our own kids or teachers have with children, the information that's put out there for kids, in order to be able to change this intergenerational stuckness that we experience around permission and sexuality.
Yes, absolutely. So it's in that foundation, right? And I think every single practitioner that deals with pelvic, sexual health, menstrual health, etc., within this field, we see it in some way. So you speaking about it in the sense of one's expressing one's sexuality and that uniqueness and how it's okay. and that you're normal. We see that also, for example, with anatomy. When we're speaking to individuals that are struggling with their own anatomy, they don't know, and they ask, am I normal? Are my labia normal? Is it okay? I think there's something wrong with me, because one's longer than the other, one's bigger than the other, one sticks out compared to the other. And that's all absolutely normal. And we see this throughout pelvic and sexual health. And more specifically, if we're speaking about cisgender, we see this in women's health a lot. It's an area of our body where we're kind of just told to stay away from, ignore, because that is bad and that is naughty and that is frowned upon. And you're not a lady if you explore anything below your belly button. So we see this, and like you say, this is something that has got to change. And let's get back to the topic of sexuality, though, because I can bring these examples into my clinical experience, which is why I specifically wanted to interview you, because I know from your psychotherapy experience that you see this through and through and on a daily basis. So yeah, I can absolutely relate to that feeling of I'm not normal, and it comes from that lack of foundation, that lack of education. So thank you for sharing that.
Yeah, it's a pleasure. And I really think the kind of other element that I would love to just touch on is for any healthcare provider that's listening. We can do our clients and our patients such a phenomenal service by just asking questions about sex. So many GPs, they don't, or physios perhaps, or even psychologists maybe, any healthcare provider who's working with a patient who has concerns around functioning, sexual functioning, reproductive functioning, we're not asking questions as healthcare providers. So we're not actually giving our clients, our patients, the permission to talk about it or the permission to ask questions. And I'll so often say to my clients, when you go to see the GP, you need to ask this question about sex. You need to take the initiative and open up that topic of conversation, because it's unfortunate, but the majority of healthcare providers won't ask. They'll avoid it. And what they do when they avoid the topic of sex is that, again, we go in the opposite direction of giving permission. We don't create the space for people to have those open conversations and to ask questions. And again, we're not normalizing that it's okay if you are this, or this. The other thing that I think is really interesting is how simple permission is, and yet how unbelievably life-changing it can be for individuals in their sexual experiences.
Yeah.
I know that in the work that I've done, I've been so fortunate to really, I'm trying to think of the best way to describe this, but to really watch other people go on this journey that I once went on myself. And that was because I did a master's in it. I studied clinical sexology, and that in itself was permission giving to me as an individual and to me as a healthcare provider. Yeah. But it's been a privilege to see how such a simple notion or approach can make such a drastic change, or can lead to such drastic change in people's lives. I guess it's one of those things, those tools in my toolbox that I often underestimate, or I forget how powerful it is, and yet I will never not bring it out to help work on a client and their concerns.
Yeah, I'm absolutely just echo what you're saying. I see it, I feel it, and this tool in the toolbox, permission, something so simple, but it's inaccessible if it's never, what I always say is you don't know what you don't know. So if you don't know that there's permission out there to be different, to express yourself, to experience things differently, then you don't know. And it's just kind of saying, or getting that message across in some way, shape or form, giving that person permission, and then that's most of the job done. Yes, we need to work with people, but it's huge. It's huge. Which is why I really wanted us to speak about this today, because in listening to your podcast, I constantly kind of hear and see this message of permission passing through each and every conversation that you have with individuals. It just goes to show how incredibly important it is in this topic of sexuality.
It's so funny you pointed that out to me, because when you did point that out and say this is the golden thread I see running through it, it did dawn on me that in every single episode, and I've done it 3-4 seasons now, I speak about permission at some point, and it doesn't matter if I am talking about period poverty, or I have been talking about sex after a spinal cord injury, or I have been speaking about having intrusive sexual thoughts. It doesn't matter what the topic is. If the topic relates to sex, every single episode, as you've noticed, there is the discussion around permission, because it is such a powerful, powerful tool.
Yeah.
And it's really amazing how people will just need to hear people talk about it. And not just their friends, or they might read it in a magazine, but to hear perhaps experts in the field or people with lived experiences. I always love speaking to people with lived experiences of a topic, because I think it becomes so much more relatable when somebody who is like you, or may be able to speak to experiences that you're having from a expert position, is able to say to you, this is normal, and don't think that there's something wrong with you. Interestingly, the biggest aspect of sex that needs the most permission, I touched on it earlier, is pleasure, particularly for those who identify as women, allowing themselves to experience pleasure. We have very, very entrenched narratives around sex, particularly for cisgendered heterosexual couples and in the Western world. Although, in the developed world, I suppose there are these narratives perpetuate as much as they do in the developing world. But too many narratives are still perpetuating around women being less than men, or those who are identifying as women not as entitled to experience desires and pleasures as much as their male or penis owning counterparts. And it's so damaging. It's so damaging for people's sexual experiences and for the way that their brain experiences sex. And as we know, the brain is the most important sex organ. And if our mind is saying to us, this is wrong, or this is bad, or what's wrong with me, or I shouldn't be allowed to enjoy this, but it feels nice. If you're getting conflicting negative messages like that in your mind, it's only going to hinder your sexual experience. So I'm so glad to know that you can hear the thread of permission running through my podcast and my episodes, because it is the most powerful tool that I have. And as healthcare providers like yourself, it's the most powerful thing we can do. We know just by offering education to our patients that is permission giving in itself. We give them the facts, and that can change so much for them. So permission can often come in very different forms. It might be words, it might be information, it might be resources we share with them, like this podcast. It can come in many different forms. And it's when somebody listening hears themselves in it and goes, oh my goodness, that's me. And they have that aha moment of realizing they're not alone and they are normal.
Like we said, permission, so easy once it's introduced. But we need to come back to that education. And it's not just the responsibility of the patient, but it's also sits in the hands of the provider, the people that we are reaching out to in times of need. And if a provider doesn't know, then that's okay, but admits to not knowing, or this conversation makes me a bit uncomfortable because I actually don't know very much about it, but I'm going to call up Catriona and I'm going to refer you so that you can chat to someone who give you that information. So yeah, we need to play our part, and it's no one to blame. We're just in this middle ground of it being incredibly frowned upon in the past, and we're moving towards this beautiful place where everyone speaks about it confidently and comfortably. But right now we're in the middle, and we need to be okay with the fact that we're in this middle ground and just accept it and work with what we've got and do the best that we can for ourselves as patients, but also for our patients as practitioners.
Absolutely agree with you. And I don't think you have to get the permission from a healthcare provider. I don't think you have to go to therapy to get that permission. people can get that permission from engaging with a podcast like this, or reading a sex positive book, or following a sex positive account on Instagram like yours, like mine, there where we're trying to put out sex positive, evidence based information that helps people realize I am normal, that there is nothing wrong with me, and I am allowed to be this person or do this thing. And I think the caveat is, with obviously giving permission. I'm not out here saying that if you want to go do something absolutely crazy sexually, that you should go and do it. I'm saying that if it is safe, if it is sane, and if it is consensual, there's nothing wrong with that. Sexual acts and sexual pleasures come in all different shapes and sizes. And while one person may find a particular sexual act very jarring and uncomfortable, another person, as long as, again, it's safe, it's sane, and consensual, may find it incredibly exciting and incredibly pleasurable. And I think with the permission, it's around being able to seek out the things that might be a turn on for you, or exciting for you, or intriguing for you, but also recognizing that it's not always going to be everybody's cup of tea. So being able to navigate that with your partner is really important as well.
That ability to identify, like I said before, you don't know what you don't know, and we're giving now people permission, and we're hoping that you, from a podcast such as this, feel that permission to explore, because you may not know what you're really into until you've given yourself the opportunity to either enjoy or dislike it. And a good example of that is pain. People can sit on completely opposite sides of the spectrum when it comes to pain. One individual might find it incredibly arousing and something they want to lean into because it enhances their sexual experience and their pleasure experience. Another person might experience pain in, like I said, the complete opposite. And that's okay. We need to address each of them as individuals and give those people, those individuals that enjoy the pleasure narrative, permission. But it's not for everyone, because those two people paired together would probably have to have a very deep and meaningful conversation about how they would like their intimate experience to play out. So like you said, making sure that it is consensual and it's sane and safe, no matter what it is. But give yourself permission, please, people, to explore what it is that you enjoy, what you find pleasureful. And no matter what it is, if you're uncertain, maybe converse with someone, but give yourself permission to go there. If it's safe, sane, and consensual, as in the words of Catriona.
Safe, sane, and consensual. You did touch on communication there briefly, and I think that is paramount, right? In any coupledom, in any relationship, in any means of trying something different, in seeking out that permission, communication is the best thing you can do for yourself. I often joke with journalists when they'll say to me, "Oh, what is the key to a successful, happy sex life?" And I'll say to them, "You don't want my answer because it's very boring." And they'll be, "Oh, you're going to say communication again, aren't you?" And I am, because it really is the thing that makes or breaks it. So communication is key. And asking our partner what they like and telling our partner what we like also creates more of a permission filled space. It also helps us to feel we are accepted and we can take that risk and be vulnerable with our partner, because getting permission from a partner to say, okay, I think I'd be open to trying that with you. This is how this makes me feel. How does it make you feel? You give each other the permission to be vulnerable. As we know, sex is very vulnerable. It's usually two people getting naked, usually together. It's incredibly physically vulnerable, but emotionally vulnerable too. So we're taking risk when we engage sexually, and feeling like we can take that risk, having the permission to take risks with one another. Again, that is what great sex is. That is what's going to change somebody's narrative around sex that they've perhaps been experiencing negatively for their whole life due to the conversations that they've heard and the education that they've gotten.
Talk about it, people.
Exactly, talk about it.
Get comfortable in these conversations, and once again, give yourself permission to be okay with not talking about it now, but maybe having a goal to be able to talk about it once you've engaged in the content that we've mentioned on this podcast, engaged in positive educational content, and knowing that one day you will be at that point of feeling comfortable and confident in communicating about your specific preferences. So if you're not at this, if you don't kind of represent this picture that we've painted about someone that is, confident, and they're giving themselves permission to explore, to experience, to communicate, to indulge in certain behaviors that are safe, sane, and consensual. If you're not at that, it's okay. It's okay. And that's, once again, we're giving you permission to take time with giving yourself permission. It's like a meta communication, yeah. But yeah, you will get there. You don't know what you don't know, and you will get to the point where you are confident and comfortable, but it takes time, and it takes commitment, and it takes prioritizing something such as your sex life. A few times before, I've spoken about the fact that, if we want to become a comrades runner, if you want to become a marathon runner, you don't just arrive at the start line and just go for it and just expect yourself to win and be good and be great and be celebrated and find it joyful. No, you train, you prepare, you dedicate, you prioritize, you look for resources from practitioners. You really prepare yourself to get to that point where you can go and run the comrade or run a marathon and enjoy it and really feel like you won with the activity. So if we relate this to intimacy, it takes time, it takes dedication, it takes prioritizing, but you can most certainly get to the point where you feel like you are enjoying that entire race. Really going off on tangents here, but yeah, Catriona, do you feel as though there's any other kind of pressing points that you want to bring up about permission? Otherwise, just kind of like summarizing this for us, if there's this take-home message from what we've discussed thus far that people, if they're writing down, or if they're trying to memorize what we're saying, what is it that we can really drive home to individuals so that they can start to grant themselves permission?
Well, I just want to say I love your metaphor. I think it's a very powerful one. You would never run that marathon without having done some serious training for it, especially the comrades. And great sex is the same. It is never just going to happen, especially for couples who've been together a long time, especially for couples with kids, especially for couples who have busy lives, domestic lives. It's never just going to happen. And I think as much as we can give ourselves permission to have great sex, we can also give ourselves permission to not be having the greatest sex, to allow ourselves to say, hey, it's okay. We're living in a global pandemic right now. It's really okay if neither of us is really up for having sex tonight or tomorrow night or this month. I think a lot of couples need to recognize that sometimes that permission is great for our own individual narratives to shift, but can also be very powerful when it takes place between the couple. So I guess to summarize, I would say that permission's the most underrated thing you can do for your sex life, for sure. That permission doesn't only have to come from a sexual health provider or a healthcare provider. It can come from a book. It can come from a podcast like this. It can come from a website. If it is sex positive and you're getting real cold hard facts about people's experiences, that helps you feel normal, that helps you feel, that you are not this outlier that you've thought yourself to be. And that ultimately permission can take place for the individual in changing the narrative that they have held onto their whole lives around their sexual experience, but can also be very powerful when it takes place between two people. And I think that the final thing I'd want to say and I'd want to add is that at the very root of permission is compassion. And what we know about compassion is that it is the antidote to shame. And what we know about shame, or what I suppose I know about shame, is it is probably tied for the number one place with anxiety as the emotion that gets into bed with us. So if you can practice compassion towards yourself and your partner, you give each other permission, you're actually undoing so much of that entrenched shame you or both of you may hold on to, and alleviating the anxiety you or both of you may be bringing into bed with you.
Catriona, that is incredibly powerful. And if someone just catches the last couple of minutes of this podcast, I feel as though they are going to be inspired and empowered going forward in their sex life. So I thank you for this incredibly powerful episode and this simple tool that we can implement. I thank you for that, because I really do believe that this can help very many people out there. So tell us now, Catriona, how can we hear more from you? How can we learn more from you? Where can we reach you?
So, wow, where do I even start? As you were doing my introduction, I was thinking to myself, I really need to take some time off or give myself a break at some stage. So, I think first and foremost, because
Agreed.
we've mentioned that is my podcast, Asking for a Friend. You mentioned it in the intro as well. I absolutely love having conversations with the guests that I get to have, and we've now, I said, in season 4. So Asking for a Friend is out weekly, and it's available on Spotify, Google, and Apple Podcasts. Then, if you want to learn from me a little bit more formally, I have online courses available through my website. That is my full name. I'm sure I'm not even going to bother saying it, because everybody will need to see it written down anyway and copy and paste it. It's very complicated. Try book a restaurant under my name. So I've got online courses available on my website, and I've got online courses available for healthcare providers and for the general public. But then I've also got a course with My Mastery, which is South Africa's leading online content platform. And I'm very thrilled that I am the master instructor for sex and intimate connections. I'm so chuffed about it. And I'm up there with a lot of very, very well established and highly respected people. So that feels pretty cool. So you can go and buy my course as a one-off if you want on the My Mastery website.
Yes, definitely a sign that you have the permission to take a big step back and relax a little, because there are a lot of places that we can reach you and learn from you, which I know takes a lot of work. So well done. And thank you for carving out some of your very precious time to be here on this podcast. I am excited to share it with everyone. So thank you so much for being here.
Such a pleasure. Love chatting to you, Candice. Always a pleasure.
Well, NurturePod listeners, until next time, please review and subscribe, and as always, stay curious. As a special treat for listening to today's episode, you can head over to the nurturepelvichealth.com website and use the code NurturePod for a 20% discount on all pelvic and sexual health courses. And now, let's indulge in a gift from Guided by Glow, whose mission it is to create a transformational practice of awakening your sensual feeling body, igniting your imagination, and cultivating a positive and thriving sexual relationship with yourself. Try today and take $20 off your annual membership using promo code NURTURE. Go to guidedbyglow.com or find it in the App Store.